Hi everybody, and welcome. Thank you for hanging on for a couple of minutes just to let everyone get into the webinar, as I said. And thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about game-changing cloud-native video workflows, and it should be a really great session today. We've got views joining us from 3 different places in the industry, so we'll get some different perspectives, and should be a packed 45 minutes. Before we really kick off, just a note, you'll see at the bottom of the Zoom webinar panel that there's a Q&A button. Please do chuck any questions you've got in there. We will address them, but we'll probably come back to them towards the end of the session unless they're particularly relevant to what we're talking about at the time. So I'd like to welcome today, joining us 3 guests. We've got Dan Pisarski from LiveU, Pete Harvey from BTTV, and Derek Gebler from our partner TownNews. Hi guys, are you still with us?
Still with you.
Look at that, right on cue. So we're gonna come back and obviously the bulk of the session today is going to be discussing some key topics for us at the moment. But before we get started, I'm going to talk to you for a couple of minutes just to give a bit of context and a little bit of background on Blackbird. We've got some names joining us today who I think may not have seen a presentation or know too much about us. So we're just going to do a couple of minutes on a bit of background from our side first. So I think one of the key topics for us today and in general at the moment is an acknowledgement that the world has definitely changed in recent times, not just around remote working and the workforce, but absolutely around general business practice, production, operations, and everything really. And certainly what we've seen over that time is the ability to not just survive but to thrive, where businesses that take advantage of tools that introduce things like added resilience, efficiency, flexibility, and within that we've got the not just talking about location but talking about scaling and so on, and of course most importantly the ability to adapt and innovate as particularly important values and attributes for a business to have. And certainly things that when Blackbird, when we're looking at the solution that we offer, we try and make sure that we can address and bolster these things within our customers' businesses. And as an introduction to Blackbird proper, hopefully if you're here you already know we're a cloud-based video editing solution. That's the easy bit. But what we do really is change how people access and use their content. So as we'll discuss a bit today, we have customers who are in file-based workflows, customers in live. We operate in on-premise media infrastructure and also completely in the cloud. But what we're doing really is changing how people get to that content, create, publish, and use the media, and within that obviously change to some of those value points that we see. So we often talk about us being fast, about access to content and turnaround of content, being flexible. One of the key attributes of anything in the cloud should be the ability to have flexibility within that, and importantly adding resilience, as I said, to our customers' businesses. And you don't have to take my word for it. We've got a few of the representatives from some of these logos on with us today, but we work across news and sports and beyond, into production workflows, as I said, live content creation, into sports teams and federations, as well as the broadcast and media space. And we're talking to a combination of customers and partners today. The partner ecosystem for us is particularly important as well, because obviously we're only a piece of that chain, and it's how you interoperate and move beyond that really starts to add some additional value in there as well. Okay, so that's enough of me for talking for now, just to give you an idea of where we come from and how we address that. I'll stop my screen share so you can look at our handsome faces in a higher resolution. And I think it's only fair, to start off with giving everyone a chance to do the same and tell us a bit about what they do. Pete, I'm going to come to you first this morning. It would be great to hear a little bit about both the operations, what you're doing at BTTV, the type of content that you're creating, and also just briefly, how Blackbird fits into that as well.
Yeah, sure. So I work across BT TV, but we obviously work very tightly with BT Sport. So we're kind of one TV delivery mechanism. And when BT Sport was born back in 2016, I think it was, they had a challenge around their ESPN channel because they had kind of a VOD mechanism in place for their sport channels 1 to 3, but they took a lot of US live content in from ESPN, and the partners and distributors didn't really have a mechanism for supporting VOD and delivering VOD. So we were kind of presented with that challenge. Can you take a baseball match at 3 o'clock in the morning and spin it round for our customers, and have them waking up to kind of a highlights reel, etc. And throughout time, that evolved into, well, actually, we've got some content that's going live on a Saturday afternoon. We're not making the transmission master of it. We're not taking it to edit. Anything you can do. So my team have been involved really in supporting that ask from the business around taking the live channels and creating VOD-ready assets for delivery customers in a quite small turnaround time, really. Yeah, that's where we've been, and the reason we kind of look to move into Blackbird is because we've been with an old kind of infrastructure that's been put in place with EVS, and it did the job that we were asking it to do back in the day, but it's still it felt very kind of outside broadcast or studio infrastructure to fit into a VOD workflow. So as we shifted into this remote world, we really had been asking the industry, do you have a solution for us? It's a fairly simplistic ask. The turnaround and the workflow is not that difficult, but actually the industry was really, really struggling. And this kind of remote production really enforced that into our world, but also into BT Sport world and a lot of broadcasters around the world that moved to full remote production.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we've seen a lot of actually is a bit of a separation between real live traditional broadcast production workflows, and then the other content workflows of which VOD and OTT and stuff often falls into it. How do we not necessarily create, but recreate, reversion content, and that doesn't have to be, like you say, shoehorning traditional infrastructure choices up into the cloud and trying to move that remote beyond that as well. Very interesting. Great. So Derek, I'm going to give you your shots as well. Tell us a bit about TownNews.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So TownNews is a digital provider of different types of tools for broadcast, for newspapers, for magazines and radio groups. So we work with over 2,000 different types of media properties, not types, but over 2,000 properties across Northern America and some outlying territories as far as ways Guam and Caribbean and things like that. So our customer base covers quite a large area. Our background, TownNews as a company started off working primarily with newspapers. And in 2018, they acquired a company called Field 59. That was a company that I was the CEO of. And Field 59, the product, is the broadcast component product, the broadcast video component, which is a cloud-based video content management system. And so as part of our offering to work with broadcasters, we early on made a decision to seek out a partner that could meet our needs for delivering video and editing video that its primary destination is for online, so a digital component. And early on, we chose Blackbird and have been working actually with Blackbird for quite some time. And
years, yeah.
Many years. So we've been very happy and basically been able to integrate Blackbird's workflow into our infrastructure. And so the two infrastructures are working together with our broadcasters to be able to immediately return video that went out over the air so that it actually can be repurposed and put online as video content within seconds. So we were looking for a provider that needed to be able to turn this around quickly. We needed frame accurate editing capabilities, and our customers were asking for reliability and dependability and that uptime that needs to be always on. So that's us in TownNews and Blackbird.
And I think we're up at, I think today there's nearly 80 regional news stations operating on that joint infrastructure at the moment. So it's definitely something that's worked out pretty well in that market. And Dan, last but not least, and actually, I doubt there's many people who need to be told what LiveU does. It's still good to kind of hear a little bit from you about where you guys are today.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Dan Pisarski, VP of Engineering for the Americas with LiveU. If anybody happens to not be familiar, LiveU is a contribution video company, kind of known as the backpack company. We originated the space in the industry called cellular bonding. So we make devices that take multiple IP connections, usually LTE, increasingly 5G, and bond them together so that you can get video from anywhere in the field back to your studio, or increasingly, and especially after the events of the last few years, back to the cloud to do more with them. And one of the things that our customers were coming to us and sort of asking about is, all right, I need to do more with this video. What can LiveU recommend for my various different workflows? And many of those workflows involve live to their MAM, or a rapid turnaround of live to their editing bay, or straight live to social as highlights. And so we became aware of Blackbird and got the demo, got very excited by what we saw, had a chance to recommend that for a few customers, and really had a ton of positive feedback on it. So it's a great complement to be able to take video from anywhere in the field using your LiveU system, and then be able to operate on it to directly into your MAM, NLE, social through Blackbird. Has become a powerful combo.
We certainly what we've seen over the last couple of years as well is a real shift of what is still technically post-production, getting closer and closer and closer to acquisition all the time. Sitting much back within that live space. Okay, so I don't think we can't talk about the cloud and remote and avoid the pandemic at the moment. So I think what I'd like to discuss a little bit about some of the challenges and successes that have come out of certainly it wasn't the start of cloud, but it was a renewal or a real focusing in on these types of workflows, I think. But Dan, I'm gonna come back to you. But before we talk generally, I'm going to ask how cloud ready were you? Where were you 18 months ago? And did you have to shift any of your kind of strategy to deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to claim we were, way out ahead.
Say we were
completely ready for it. And it wouldn't be true. We had done operations for years in the cloud, including our units already had a cloud component in terms of command and control, and we had a cloud application that did that, and we had hundreds of users that were using cloud resources to take our bonded stream, convert that to web streaming formats, send that on to Facebook Live or YouTube, that kind of thing. But that we were at the same place that I think many companies out there were in terms of just sort of investigating of like, well, not just going to Facebook, there's other things we can do in the cloud here. And obviously the future is cloud resources and capability, cloud resources for computing capability and being able to operate on video in that manner. And we were, investigating it, working with it. I wouldn't say we had any major deployments or had any great examples we could point to pre-pandemic to say, oh, look at this full cloud infrastructure that somebody had implemented. And that changed very rapidly, right? We did have to shift resources around, change the roadmap, change plans, because we were immediately getting pushed over. Okay, the example we use a lot in this thing is one of our customers, and probably a name that everybody knows, has a office in Manhattan, and just came in one day and was like, you can't go back in the building, like you have to like turn around and go home. And so that panic of like, how do we keep the network online, if we don't have access to the building, became a sort of, I need a solution of how I could do all of this in cloud tomorrow, and it was really a rush to get there. And I think what we've seen since then, which is very exciting to us, and I think it's a story that we're not originating, it's being told a lot by a lot of different companies, is that once companies got over that panic moment of like, how do I do this now, and keep going, they learned they love the cloud, right? They learned all the kind of power that they knew was going to be there, but they were maybe moving at that typical broadcast engineering pace of where we're going to get to that technology. And then once they had that little taste of it, it was like, oh well, yeah, this stuff works great. Let's there's no even as the world hopefully returns to normal, we see a lot of advantages here and things to keep going on, and technology we're going to continue to leverage as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, was there anything, looking at the inevitable challenges when a shift like that happens, was there anything that was the hardest piece of that? Was it moving the product environment? Was it infrastructure? Was it deploying, as you said, not being able to get on site, or even something that comes, talking as a technology supplier, is there's an inevitable shift when you move to the cloud of pricing models and business models as well, in the way that people engage with it. Was there anything in particular that was the toughest lump to get over?
I think that it was probably the toughest lump to get over was like the human learning curve, right? It was everybody getting used to it, both on our side and on the customer side. I think that thankfully, knock on wood, the technology was all there. I mean, a lot of this had been worked on, previously in terms of protocols, resiliency, low latency, what cloud resources it took to move this video around and everything. All that stuff existed. It was the human impact. From my perspective, the hard part was the human impact, the sudden learning curve of like, okay, let me learn how to do all of this now. For a lot of engineers was, a rapid and big leap. It was, again, maybe something they were reading about in their free time, curious about, upping their learning curve as time permitted, but now they were kind of thrown into the hot seat, had to figure it out fast.
I think as well, certainly for us, dealing with changing any workflow tends to be, it's a technical or an operational thing to overcome. Right? You've got to make it work. But what often gets overlooked, like you said, on the human element, is suddenly that team not being in the same room, or everybody going home. It doesn't matter, they might have a perfectly functional system, but there's still a massive disruption in that the human interface that's happening on that team. I mean, Pete, I'm going to ask you, as one of the, someone who actually, had to send everybody home and change their operations in that way very suddenly. Were there positives as well that came out of that, as well as the inevitable challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always remember the day kind of being locked down in the UK. We were about a week out from it and having a real kind of adult conversation with my team, and I almost got laughed out of the room. It was kind of like, we're not, that's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. I just suggested that, the following day it would be a good idea if we all picked our laptops up and see how it went, and gave it a dry run. And it went remarkably well, but there were still some points where we had to send a team back in, make some adjustments, and then learn to work with it. But yeah, I think kind of whatever it is, 18, 19 months on, and that's the reasoning why we looked at the Blackbird model, because we knew that the world has changed. It's probably never going to go back, and that remote working environment is really going to support the way that people interact with the media and their working day. And actually, they saw the benefits from moving from our older model to our newer model, because we were looking at things like video and audio latency, and just systems that were slow to respond. And so using Blackbird from that point of view made life a lot simpler for us. But as an overall kind of lift and shift, it went surprisingly well, and I think that probably shows you how much the industry has changed over the years with remote working and remote functionality into our servers. It doesn't really matter where they are, just as long as you can get a connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, you know, as we've said, cloud isn't new. It's not 18 months old, and there's been lots of functions that have been around. Not, you know, not least ourselves, of course. I would say that operating in the cloud for years. But I think, you know, I think we've been forced into, you know, it's been forced to mature in terms of putting proper ecosystems and workflows in place. And I mean, Pete, just on that, you know, a long way down the road now from that, are there still challenges that you're trying to solve?
I don't think there are. I think there's more. It's more around what opportunities are we maybe missing out on that we haven't considered. So, you know, when we were working with the Blackbird team, we ran through a proof of concept, and you know, it's not all about the product; it's the people as well, right? So the team that we were working with on both sides, the two ops teams, you know, really, you know, worked well, and our systems integrators, and it pulled it all together, and we really got the value out of the Blackbird model within quite a small space of time. I think now, rather than, there might be some infrastructure challenges internally where we can be a bit smarter with cloud-to-cloud delivery, but that's an infrastructure thing at our end that we need to deal with regards to the way that we work in a Blackbird model. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to take up some of the kind of traditional Avid edit workflows and things like that. And as Derek was saying earlier, you know, you take live and you turn it around, and all of a sudden it's just content for the customers, right? That they may not have had available to them previously because it was going to require an Avid editor and a suite and expense and time and, you know, grading and all the rest of it. And nowadays it's just kind of like, okay, grab it, turn it around, give it to the customer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely changed on it. So I know Derek, you know, when we had spoken before about you know, you guys you felt in a very good position to kind of support these workflows changing and people going to the cloud, but we've seen quite a change in, you know, in the consumption of content and in the kind of throughput, haven't you, last year particularly?
Oh yeah. And local news content, it was amazing what happened with the production of content. Yeah, I mean, I sympathize with our customers. Our customers had to, you know, they had their local newsrooms. They were very non-cloud based because they were local at their various departments and their stations. But the tools they use that are provided by us were already in place. So yeah, they were able to continue to cut. They were able to create exclusive content. In that time, we saw a huge bump in traffic. I think everyone saw a huge bump in the types of content being consumed last year, the time spent. It was just a confluence of all sorts of things happening. You know, it really was driving the news cycle was on. It was always on, and so our customers were really paying attention to that. The developments in the adoption of CTV and OTT, that's driving a lot of consumption too. So the best thing that we could do during that time is make sure that they could get to their products the way they're supposed to, and make sure that they're up and always on, and provide them a level of dependability. And that's really what they needed during that time. I think during that time they've changed. Our customers have changed the way that they produce content. And so that's, I don't always get an insight into the way that they do things, but I do know that they did have to change. And the creation of content, it's the creation side, I think, that they needed to change their model on. But once it got out, I mean, that was, I don't want to say it was the easy part, but we probably had the easy side of things during that time. We've been doing cloud for a long time.
Yeah, I think you know, from our side, it's the same. It wasn't about changing what we do, but it was definitely about supporting customers through that change as well. I think one interesting thing to talk about now would be, you know, where we are kind of heading to, and I don't mean purely in a kind of technical level, but I mentioned before about you know, I think this has kind of forced a bit of a maturity here, in a few ways, right? So in terms of interoperability, having more complex systems in the cloud, and you know, being able to do more than just a certain function. But I also think, and you're more than welcome to disagree with me, that you know, a lot of the functional challenges were obviously the you know, the most important mission critical things that need to get sorted as soon as possible are sorted, more or less, right? So there's always change and there's innovation happening and there's things moving forward on a technical level. But I think, you know, what I've started to see is the focus move away from performing a technical function into wider benefits, the business benefits of the cloud. You know, one that's we've done a lot of work on recently, particularly is sustainability. We kind of released a report on this, and you know, we've seen that not just be a, you know, a buzzword, but something that actually seriously affects the brand of our customers. And you know, from a business point of view, can have a real input, and actually, you know, starting to come back in now to be something that affects you know, technical vendors very directly as a buying criteria. So I mean, I'll throw this open. Maybe I'll come to you first, Dan. But you know, we either, you know, around sustainability specifically, has that become something that's been particularly important to LiveU? But beyond that, you know, are there other business benefits or, you know, things that have come in beyond the functional that you've started to see from your customers? It's a very long question.
Yeah.
So you followed it. Yeah.
I think you know, we haven't yet seen that interest in sustainability from our customer base, but I think it is something that of course we'll be very interested in. I agree. It's, you know, it's more than just a buzzword. It's something that, you know, we would deeply value as a company. I think, you know, beyond just the functionality, somebody had, you know, kind of previously mentioned like uptime. Like it's a combination of the things that I think in the, you know, IT, non-broadcast IT world, we're known for maybe a few extra years when it comes to cloud. That actually things like uptime and security, as one, especially that we get a lot of inquiries about, are actually increased in the cloud. Contrary to, you know, what your initial logic may think of, like, hey, if I've got this server in my data center, that's got to be more secure to me because I have control over it, right? And the actual answer is, you're probably not doing as great a job with that server as one of these huge cloud hosts are, you know, in terms of the everything down to like physical security of the data plan all the way up to like the, you know, configuration of the software and everything. So it's actually a huge boost to security, and security's become just a lead issue for a lot of our customers, especially on the news side, to make sure that, you know, they're not vulnerable. So, you know, we see big advantages to the cloud there as well. Of course, uptime, I mean, that's a little bit more logical one, but you know, what you can achieve in terms of uptime in the cloud is again well beyond all the trouble you want in terms as an end user, instead of having to worry about, you know, let me host some of this in New York and some of it in London and some of it here, and make sure that if we, you know, one went down, I could fail over the other. Let somebody else worry about all that, and you can just take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think another you know, an interesting project that we worked on recently together has been, well, a couple of iterations of the German elections. There's another one coming up. So that's been fantastic on many levels, and was, you know, facilitated by LiveU. So thanks for that one. But what we've seen there is not just using cloud infrastructure, so LiveU Matrix for live stream management and Blackbird for clipping and publishing, to scale infrastructure. Obviously, elections is a classic event where you need fairly significant scale beyond your day-to-day to handle it. But on that project, and we, you know, we released a bit of information on this slightly earlier in the year. We've got multiple, I think, in the upcoming elections in the next couple of weeks, 5 or 6 different broadcast entities sharing that infrastructure. So it'd be good to hear a little bit about that from your side, Dan.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wasn't the one directly involved in that project, but I'm standing in for the person on the LiveU side that was.
You can take the credit. It's okay.
Yeah, I say that also just in case I misquote any of these numbers compared to what was shared before. But yeah, it was, you know, like up to 16 simultaneous sources in the field coming through LiveU Matrix, so that the sources could still be used live and as part of the live production in a pool feed sort of format, where any one of the sharing entities could take the same live feed and use it, but then also being fed into the Blackbird system, and a common bin of footage there, so that they could take that, operate on it in Blackbird, and take it directly to their media asset management system, right into their NLE workflow or their file workflow, as well as if they wanted to use it as highlighting right to social. So that shared infrastructure is a really good point when it comes to sustainability. It certainly was a great point when it comes to scalability. I mean, you really kind of touched on the challenge around scalability that the cloud really helps. And I'm kind of stating the obvious here for everybody that knows cloud, but like, I only need that scalability for a week. I don't want to invest in 2 new racks of gear to get this done, and then have to figure out what to do with all that gear after it's said and done. So that kind of elastic scalability is a big advantage.
Yeah, definitely. And on a when we get down to the real meat of it as well, it's a shared cost, right? So there's multiple parties there that and it's not just the cost of the infrastructure, where instead of each of them handling 5 feeds, they're sharing that content with, it should be said, distinct, secure access to their own creation within that. But it's beyond that, and again, feeding back into sustainability. It's less people on site generating 4 versions of the same thing, essentially. So yeah, that really interesting project, I think. And I know, Derek, when we've talked a bit about cloud, one of the things you've said, and being in the live news world is not a surprise, has been particularly important to your customers, is the resilience, right? So the uptime and that side of the cloud as well.
Right. We are, I'd say, when we're working with Blackbird, there are different points that we work, but it all starts, we have dedicated hardware. We do have hardware on the ground. We're managing, more than 80 different pieces of hardware at all these different locations, but they're all feeding into the Blackbird infrastructure for that cloud editing. So, having that work with our infrastructure together, I feel like we notice, we want to make sure that we're always available, and so we have a good partnership there. It's not like we're handling this all the way through, but it's got to be solid as the handoffs happen from point A to point B to point C. Probably the most variable bit is actually getting it out of the different television stations. They all have different outputs, and that's part of the resiliency too, is that the editing interface, you can work with really low bandwidth as well. And I think that's actually part of it's not part of the infrastructure itself, it's just part of the codec, and it's part of the editing interface, that we can have these folks who have way varying different types of connection speeds still make a connection, still get that edit out, still publish it into our system. It provides us a peace of mind, because we're supporting them on other things too. So we may be running their entire website. So this is a component that fits into the whole picture here. But yeah, I'd say we TownNews values that extremely.
I think it's something that's is a slight change in the market as well. Is in the past, redundancy or resilience has been on the broadcaster or the customer. They need to have redundant systems and spares and accommodate that. Now it's sat with the vendor, where you're bringing someone onto your service and they're asking for 3, 4, 5 nines of uptime, and it's a definite shift there, but it's only a good thing, right? So it's a good thing for the end user. It ends up with a better experience, and again, a more efficient model of working together. I mean, when you're looking at new technologies now, obviously, the key thing is that it performs what it needs to do and it does it well. How much do other elements like sustainability come into into that process?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, there's a real shift change. You know, the old TV model has been like kind of, you know, buy it, rack it up, buy it, rack it up again. Don't worry
Sweat it for 5 years.
Totally. Yeah, and it's ironic really because I was in the office the other day and I saw someone walking around and they literally were clearing out rack room with servers that were just end of life, and you just looked at it and you just thought, wow, how much of there's been so much of a shift in your own brain as to, oh my god, that is so unnecessary. But that's just how we worked as a TV industry. That was just what you did. And I think now it's kind of like, you know, into the top level where the companies and the CEOs are looking at it and they're saying, well, actually, no, before you buy, think about where you're going to be putting this. Think about how much strain we're going to put on our power and our environment, and it's going to affect our customers. And, you know, just think about every point before you make that migration or that purchase, because there's more to think about than just buy a server, cable it up, lift it out.
Yeah, I think I mean, has it changed the way you approach it as well, Pete? Just going to make you unmute again.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, like exactly what you mentioned, you know, the process in the past was buy equipment, just drop my phone, buy equipment, you know, make sure that that's going to be an investment that works for the business over a very long period of time. Certainly that doesn't apply anywhere near as much, if at all, in some cloud services. So I mean, the benefit for you, I imagine, is choice, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier for you to change and work with multiple different service providers. And have you seen a benefit from that yet?
Yeah, but also we're going back to, you know, resilience is on you now, right? So although we've got to answer to someone, it's on you to provide that, and less for me to worry about as a kind of operations manager. And it does change you. It does change you because, you know, as I said, you've got that remote working model. Everything's invisible to our operations team. Yeah, whereas before, physically it was there. They could walk into a rack room. They would know what they needed to do, etc. When you're working in such a remote environment, yeah, we still need it. But actually, you know, the ebb and the flow of our business model is going to change even more so in the next 5 years, where our partners, we've got end of life equipment with them, and then we'll be making a decision when we get to that point. Do we stick with this person? Do they offer cloud services, or do we in fact look to move to another vendor that can give us what we need? So, you know, previously it was just stick with what you've got, keep doing the same thing, and now I think we're really challenging ourselves with you know, what our working model is and how it fits into our environment.
So I think it's interesting, you know, for a successful relationship there, it's not just about what you do, it's becoming more and more about how you do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and being able to support that. Excellent. Well, we're actually only a few minutes left. These things always fly by. So I'm going to throw a couple of questions out there, and anyone on the session, please do chuck some more questions in. I'll give you guys a break for a minute, and I'll answer one that's been pushed into us here at Blackbird about, you know, running our own infrastructure, or you know, how we actually deploy, which I think is quite interesting, or at least good for us to give a bit of detail on. So as we've kind of touched on this session, Blackbird is designed to integrate with partners and customers. So we do run our own cloud that is purely for the users to log in and edit. And you can think of that as a kind of abstract access layer, right? So anybody anywhere can log into a browser on low bandwidth and access any frame of an unlimited amount of content instantly, live streams or files or whatever it might be. But all that person is doing really is viewing that content, scrubbing through it, and then obviously bringing it in and creating from it, editing, real-time multi-track editing, and so on. But the actual media and the ingest functions and publish functions, everything like that stays back on original infrastructure. So for us, we could be, as we are, you know, with Pete at BT, we can be integrated back into, you know, core on-prem infrastructure. taking anything, you know, down to baseband SDI signals in, reading network attached storage and so on. Or if, you know, if people have content and streams running up in any of the public cloud providers, that's where that function will sit. So, you know, one of the infrastructure is very important from the Blackbird side, not to talk about us too much, but because it's a key area where we add these benefits, because we're not moving content around. So when we talk about sustainability and efficiencies and things like that, it's critical for us is actually how we architect the system is what allows us to do that. Excellent. So that's enough of me doing the sales pitch. Derek, I'm gonna ask you a question here about the kind of surrounding systems. So, you know, we've got in the content chain for TownNews. I mentioned at the start, you know, we know that the editing or clipping and editing and video production is a piece normally in the middle of that content chain. What else are you handling around Blackbird? What else exists within that flow? Well,
I mean, it's surrounding Blackbird and surrounding the Field 59 video CMS. You know, we've got one of our core businesses is providing content management as well. So our users are authoring inside either our WordPress CMS or our proprietary CMS, and they're creating the articles, they're writing the stories, and then what's happening is they're pulling in the videos. So part of the chain is, okay, create the video in Blackbird, then make sure it gets processed through our video CMS so that it can actually be pulled in and associated with a story or article inside the CMS and then published out to their websites. Or in some cases, they're publishing them out to their OTT apps, which we also provide the services for that. Or, you know, they're going out to their mobile apps as well. So there's the start of the chain, and then kind of where it all ends up, and it's ending up in any of those places: mobile, web, OTT.
It's I think if you go back, you know, 5 years even, you probably wouldn't find acquisition, editing, and you know, content distribution as close together as they are now. You know, they were kind of distinct functions rather than running all as one. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, we've got 1 minute left. Dan, I'm going to give you a chance. What's next for LiveU? What's you know, Matrix is obviously a major new thing for you guys. What's happening with that?
So, you know, I think one of the things that came out of the cloud burst during the pandemic, and you were just kind of asking like what you know surrounds these systems, or what's the extra things we have to put in the system, is the orchestration kind of component of it, the human layer of, you know, great, I can have all my people at home now working on different functions, whether it's for the live production or for you know, editing. How do I communicate with those people? Am I always opening up a Zoom window, or am I you know, doing that over text, or we're doing that over phone? Like, what's the communication that look like? I think that's also drastically changed post-pandemic, and that's something that LiveU wants to get involved in there as well, so that we can help our people, you know, who have, and you know, our whole goal is anywhere in the world, remote, you know, using bandwidth you brought with you in the form of LiveU Pack. We also want to be able to communicate between those people or all around the world as best we can. So that's our next step.
Excellent. Sounds like a good one. All right, guys. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I always wish these things could be longer than they are. But I say thank you to everyone who's joined us today. I hope you found it interesting. Thanks to Dan, Derek, and Pete for your time as well. We really appreciate it. If you want any more information from any of us, please feel free to get in touch. There's an email address on the screen right now. And of course, you can come and check out the websites and get in touch with us that way. And thanks for joining us. Cheers. Bye.